Mindset Podcast. We're your guide as you make your way through life, getting better 1% every day. We believe that life is lived and true victory won through adversity. Nothing easy is ever worth it. We believe in the warrior ethos and support those that choose to walk that path.
Go. What's happening, Christun?
Hello.
Hey, thanks for joining me. I have recently discovered you on Instagram. I think I found you that way through some Ryan Hoover stuff.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what black hole or rabbit hole I went down, but I love your message. I'm a martial arts instructor myself. I own a gym and train women as well. And I have learned a lot from you via Instagram.
Oh, thank you so much. That's awesome. That makes me feel great. Ryan Hoover's awesome. They're doing what they're doing over in North Carolina is just something else. Well, like basically everywhere in the States now at this point. But
yeah, I think so. I'm a big fan of theirs. But let's talk about you. So give me a little bit of background if you don't mind. I mean, I'm going to step on your toes, I guess, a little bit. And I read that you're a second-degree black belt in karate. And you train a bunch of other things. And you are an instructor.
I'm probably going to burn a lot of people when I say this, but I do have a second-degree black belt in karate. I earned it. Do I think it's useful? No.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. I am now in Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu. I'll probably be white belt forever in Jiu-Jitsu. So
Same.
Yeah, just never gonna end.
I'm one of those 8-year blue belts myself.
Do what?
So I'm one of those 8-year blue belts.
Right. Yeah. I actually make a rash guard and sell it that says white belt forever. And
but that's how it should be.
But I mean, I did a blog on that too about understanding like you're all at the bet, to be a good instructor, you need to be white belt and everything continually. Like,
right.
So, but yeah, I train at TCB MMA in Rogers, Arkansas under Aaron Kimball. And they're a great group of people. That's really awesome. I started Healthy Buffalo almost 3 years ago. Didn't really do much with it until about 2 years ago. Okay. But I was a foster parent for 10 years and I had a lot of teen girls and I have a lot of adopted. All my kids are adopted. So I have 9 kids. And there was a lot. I'm
going to pause there for a second. No wonder you're a self-defense instructor. 9 children in your house.
Yeah, they're a hoot, man. They're all in it too, except the youngest. So except my 2 older girls are married. So
okay.
But yeah, we adopted them as teens. So they were 15 and 16 when we adopted them. Wow. The 2 older girls.
Wow.
And so we just saw we had a lot of teen girls that came through our house and just a lot of boundary issues that I was starting to see that were problems. And that's where I wanted to kind of start. I was like, oh, if we don't even fix this, we're not even so I'm a huge fan of foundations.
Okay.
And you really have to have even, I always joke, you're never too good, even in boxing. Like you're never too good for the foundations class. And
right.
Always go back because you're always going to learn something about how you're messing something up.
Right. White belt forever.
White belt forever.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So that's really how it started. And then took an ECQC class with Craig Douglas. Okay. Basically because I wanted to test out my karate. I was like, I don't think this shit's going to work. And I'm like one of those people where I just kind of throw myself in there. I had no clue what I was getting into with that. Okay. I didn't even know what combatives was. It was like, I had no idea. And ended up finding out I needed jujitsu after that because I'm 125 pounds. And it doesn't take anything for somebody to just chuck my ass on the ground. So, so good times.
That's awesome. Well, so that makes sense that if you have daughters and you're worried about them, but you have a history of training in the martial arts, right? So, I mean, you train, so you don't get a second-degree black belt everywhere, overnight. I mean, some places maybe, but for the most part, you had to have done that beforehand. So that's what led you down that path.
Correct.
Yeah. And you started
it's been almost a decade now, I think.
Wow.
Just some form of martial arts. Yeah.
That's great. Do you obviously you're sort of leading the way and showing your kids, but do they train as well?
They do. So they are at TCB. We were at there's another group called TOSS. They're a Gracie Academy over in Bentonville, Arkansas. So they were there for a while. And they're a really great group and everything. It's just timing and how we work and how we travel and stuff like that. So now they're more with me at TCB. So
Awesome. So what does Healthy Buffalo look like to you in terms of the business aspect of it? I mean, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
it's always constantly adapting and overcoming.
It should be.
It is right now. I'll teach seminars. So I'll either team up with somebody that's a pistol instructor or just a gym that wants to host me, or businesses or churches or schools. And I have about a 3-hour class that's just basically it's a lot of stuff off of Craig Douglas's like managing unknown contact stuff. And because that's one of the things that I loved about his is that he was very much pioneering the whole concept. It seemed like of just dealing with space in the first place, dealing with boundaries. Like I was going from a more psychological female aspect of it, but he's very good at just like trimming the fat. And like what he did was just like, when the first time I took his class, I was like floored, because he had it all down to an art of like, these are drills that you can run in terms of how to keep boundaries on people, how to manage space. And he's coming from it from a law enforcement background. And, like basically he, was a undercover cop in New Orleans forever. So he has a much different background. Yeah, a little bit tougher.
Interesting. Well, how do you think that I mean, you're training in multiple disciplines, right? I mean, you got the karate background, you say you're doing Muay Thai forever, white belt forever, jiu-jitsu or whatever. I mean, how does that inform your teaching style? Devoid of the woman aspect. And I do want to get into that with you.
Okay.
But,
how does it form a training?
like you personally, I mean, how has it evolved?
Wow, I don't think I've ever been asked this question. How has it evolved?
Well, my goal is
the
to put you on
biggest
the spot
aspect is
constantly.
just to keep coming back, keep training, like because you don't like it all the time,
right?
Like, and to just keep improving, and you're never going to achieve. I think that's the biggest thing, is like the understanding of you're never going to become John Wick. So that's depressing.
Damn.
I don't know
am I
if you know
doing
that or not, but you're just never going to achieve that. Everybody's like, oh man, that's kind of badass. And I was like, I just feel like a hot mess. Like, so all the
really.
time. But I love it. Like it's also something like that builds something in you. Like even if you're having like a rough year or day or whatever, like it'll build you, go in there and I feel better because I'm like, okay, well, at least I did something. I don't know. Yeah. I do a lot with the concept of keep moving forward, or how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And it's just, sometimes you have to step back and take a very, very small step.
I like that.
And so,
yeah, I mean, I think probably some of the best days I've ever had training are the days I was like almost didn't go.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I don't want to be here.
Yeah. And those days when you're in the car or whatever, and you're right outside the door and you're watching people go in and you're like, do I like really today? I'm like, am I going to do this? Like, what is that feeling? I mean, I don't know. I don't even know why I then go in, but you still do.
Yep. You come in, you're just in a foul mood, and then pretty soon you're rolling around. And that's the other part. Who was I recently joke? I was teasing about how you don't date in the gym, and the reason you don't date in the gym is because then if things go south, you got to figure out who gets the dog in the divorce, sort of thing. And it was like, no, that's like a lifeline right now.
Right.
No.
Who gets to school? Yeah, who gets to keep going to class? Well, how do you stay motivated? I mean, what keeps you motivated to keep going?
It's funny. I just saw a podcast. I'm following this guy called William Googe, and he's running across the United States right now. And it's insane. This guy runs like almost 60 miles a day. And one of the things that I love that he said, because I was like, oh, that's so relatable, is he says that he sets himself publicly for certain goals of, oh, I'm going to do this. Therefore, it's like, oh, now I got to really back my mouth up. And so I think
Right.
that's really ultimately, if you want to get right down to it, it's like that's what keeps me going. Is like I'm going to say I'm going to do this, and so if I do this, I'm like, oh shit, I really
Yeah.
gotta.
I told these people I'm gonna be
I
there.
told these people I was going to do that. That's where I'm at right now with like my like perpetual fight camp with MMA.
Yeah. You're like, right before you step on the mat, you're like, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? And then you go and you're like, oh, okay, this is fun.
So yeah, I'm not a self-motivator. I have to tell other people, and then I have to.
That's
probably
funny.
pride.
That's funny. Well, so I want to get into some self-defense versus martial arts talk.
Yes.
You know, this I'm going to be trendy and say this channel is this show. It's not specifically martial arts, but you know, I'm a lifelong martial artist, and I know like all these approaches to life. You know, they apply to everything, and that's
They do.
the beauty of martial arts is it sort of like helps bring you up, you know, and it makes you a person that can adapt and overcome, sort of a thing. But what are some of the misconceptions that you think people have between martial arts and self-defense?
One of my biggest pet peeves that I absolutely hate is, I'm going to rag on Taekwondo, so sorry. But I hate when you get this 14-year-old, 85-pound girl that gets a black belt in Taekwondo, and then they send her out into the world thinking, oh, she can go kick men's asses.
Right.
One of the best things that I loved about what Ryan Hoover was, he very much stresses that size matters. And it does. Like, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter how technical I can get. It doesn't matter how many black belts I have under my belt. It doesn't matter. Like, it's still going to matter at the end of the day, pound for pound. Like,
Yeah.
an average size man is going to do some damage to me no matter what, even. And then the other one is just because you have martial arts experience, MMA is not the same as self-defense. Like, I will tell you that straight up, because that was one of the best things the things that I was discussing recently with one of my coaches was, in self-defense, I'm trying to get away. In MMA, I have to stay in the cage. Otherwise I look like a weenie. So I can't get out. Bang on the door.
Right.
So that's totally different. Like, because you're training to stay in the fight, you're training to do this. In self-defense, you're training to get away. And so those are different movements. Like, even when I went into, like, started doing my shift towards doing this MMA fight that's coming up, that shift was very different for me, because a lot of the stuff that I've done, even in a clinch, was like to push away, to get away, and stuff like that, versus, being more strategic.
Right.
So
That makes sense. Yeah, it's sport versus like reality,
Right. You
I
can't
do hate-
pull a knife out.
I do hate that term, and maybe you talked me off a ledge. I don't know. Maybe you feel the same way. That term of like reality-based martial arts. Like, it kind of makes my skin crawl a little bit.
What would you suggest, though, as opposed to that?
I don't know, and that's why I don't. I'll just say it here. I won't say it in class.
That's funny.
It is reality, though. I mean, there's a big difference between sport and reality.
I think there's a big thing. A part of our job, if you want to do it well, is to provide a reality check for other people.
Yeah.
One of my very first things that I do when I run a course is I show them how easy it is to enclose space on a person starting at 15 feet back. And usually I pick a person that is a martial artist in the class, because I'll ask them, like, what's your experience before? And it is about, like, then I'll walk up to them, and I'm walking up to them slowly, but I'm talking to them. And I'm usually doing like a scenario, something about, like, I don't know, like, you hit my car or something like this.
Okay.
The scenario doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with what I'm even saying. The fact is that I'm usually cussing at them too. And it's getting them to understand the freeze response of, they're like, hey, I'm here in a self-defense class, and what is this woman doing? They don't back up. They don't even get their hands up. They're just like this. And that's the they're perplexed. They don't know. And you have different types of freeze responses of what the hell is going on, because your brain's playing catch up to a person like, oh, wait, are you really trying to hurt me? And then you have just, when you're in fight, you have like tonic immobility and things like that. And so that's one of the drills that I would say examples that I use. And then the second one is I'll usually pick a woman, and I will just I'll have her lay on the ground, and I'll like lay across her, like perpendicular, and I'll just dead weight. and I'll be like, get me off of you.
Right.
And, sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. Occasionally I'll pick the one that actually has jujitsu experience. So they do well. And I'm like, damn it. But for the most part, it is really eye-opening because then I explain to them, I'm like, look, here's the deal. I'm 125 pounds and I'm just dead weighting on you. I'm not trying to hold you down. I'm not punching you. I'm not kicking you. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just a dead weight and you can't move me off of you. And I was like, that is what I'm talking about how size matters.
Right. That's so true. That's interesting. So clearly difference between teaching men and women. I mean, obviously anyone who's taught anything, remotely physical knows the difference, but,
right.
So what are some of the things you do to help encourage women to get in there and mix it up? I mean, I in my, my short experience in doing all this stuff, they usually feel kind of intimidated,
Yeah. I'm still intimidated.
I mean, I do too, but hey.
I travel and I'll go and enter new gyms, and I brush it off. I use a lot with laughter, because I talk about, women when they first start doing like scenario work and stuff in my class, they'll start laughing, and I'll stop them and I'll be like, you know what, that's natural. When you get nervous, people are like, and so I also, I like to talk about like what is natural to what you're going to do. Like, what is your body actually going to do? And especially under stress and things like this, and even at small levels and stuff. One of the biggest things that I tell people, especially at the end of my course, is I don't care what you do. I'm not here to advocate for you to do. I'd like for you to do jiu-jitsu, but I'm not here to advocate for you to go out and do any of these things. What I want you to do is do something.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is, whatever it is, something towards your own personal protection, whether it's buying a damn Swiss Army knife or a gun. I don't care, but go and learn, because once they do one thing, it's the snowball effect. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? So if they go and they do one thing, then they're going to do the next thing. And someday they'll be scrolling through their phone and they'll see something else because it's on their algorithm because they bought that Swiss Army knife. I don't know. But so that's what I do, is encourage them just one step. That was one of the things that was super eye-opening for me with Fit to Fight with Ryan Hoover, is that he was actually meeting people, and I had never seen that before. All these martial arts gyms were always just super intimidating to walk into, and I was like, you're not getting the people that need this the most. And Ryan Hoover, he has like, I love this. So I think probably, I'll tell you what, where do I think the most effectiveness is going to go is getting the instructors, is getting them to understand where these other people are coming from. Because like, I love the fact that like Fit to Fight, they have a heavy bag class. So you can go in and you can just punch a bag. It's not as intimidating. It feels like a workout. It's 30 minutes. People of all ages, genders, everybody can do this, right? And then they start to see other things because they're in this building, right? And now they get to see jiu-jitsu, and now they get to see, they have a defensive options course and stuff like this. And so then they start to they ease on into it that way. I recently got into a little bit of an online thing because there were people knocking women's jiu-jitsu classes. And I was like, why would you knock that? Like, if that's what it takes to get them started.
Yeah. What do you care?
Because it's like, now here's the other part too. Like, and this is what I do. You can be a fighting only gym and that's what you're catering to. And that's completely fine. Like, if that's your goal, awesome. Like, I think that TCB is probably geared more towards the fighting aspect of it. And that's fine. That's why I'm there. I love it. Because it's not related really. I mean, it is, but it's not as related to what I do.
You'd be an outlier, right? If I took all the women in the world and let's say which ones do martial arts, I mean, you'd be one of the outliers.
Right. Yeah. So it's very neat. So it's like with the gateway part is that what I'm interested in is how do you bridge that gap to get women more into there. And I mean, I read, I was talking with Maggie from MDM Tactical. So she's a pistol instructor down in Gainesville, Florida. And I've run a couple courses with her. She's amazing. But she was, we were having a discussion about how there was a jiu-jitsu gym that I think her brother or someone was running. And the second that they decided to do a women's only class it grew. But then within like a month of them having that women's only class, they had 3 of those women that started going to the co-ed class. And I was like, that's the gap. That's where I love that story because they were like, okay, well now I've left. That's where I said I wasn't going to go do jiu. I mean, I did in like an ECQC thing where I was rolling around, but I think it was more just like concern for my life.
Right.
Yeah.
That seems very important. Yeah, I mean, I think, maybe you could disagree. I don't know, maybe give some insight, but it seems like it stems from most of us teach the way we were taught. And if most of us are men, then we're just going to teach like we, have taught other dudes.
Right.
We're not going to think about the transition.
But that's okay. I mean, that's the other part too, is like, and that's what I've seen too, is like, I've met so many and phenomenal like instructors.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are men. Aaron Giannetti is one of my favorites in the whole world. Like, but that's the best part about being an instructor, is the one that's going to continue to put themselves out there and continue to learn. They recognize, oh, this is a deficit and I want to fix this. And that's for men and women alike. A lot of the men that reach out to me that want to team up are usually because they're like, I'm trying to reach the women in my life. And so they want me to come and help them. And then we'll run my course. And then we run like foundational pistols and the next half of the day. And that usually works really well. It's a lot of fun. And it gets them comfortable, because also men and women, I feel like, learn firearms very differently too in the very beginning.
Really?
So,
tell me how. Tell me how. What's that about?
I think, okay, men have no issues coming in with the FAFO. Like, they'll come in and just take the gun and just start shooting. Safety is not even like a thing. And not in a bad way. Like, they're not, I'm not saying like, it's like,
have you ever seen the Instagram of there's like two little boys and they're like, this is why men don't live as long, and one's like flipping the lid of the trash can up in the other one's face.
Yes,
and the other one's just laughing at him, and then he takes a turn. I think you're right.
Well, and so, but then with women, like with firearms, it's intimidating, obviously, but then they want to learn every aspect about it. Like, what is every part of this gun before they even pick it up and fire?
Right.
And they also don't want to be, and this is what I deal with, because I rag on the revolver a lot. I love revolvers. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I did a video on black powder pistols, revolvers. But that's the gun that it's like the men in their life, like what you said, they've been told, and this is what they've been, taught and all this stuff. And they go and they buy their wife or significant other a revolver. And then it sits in her closet for, 2 years until she might take this class. And then I'll have all my Glocks sitting out. And then, or, whoever the instructor is, he'll have his guns sitting out. And then she's got her revolver. And she starts looking at this and she realizes, oh, this isn't the gun I want. And so that would be the big one, is like, let your wife or girlfriend pick out her own gun and let her try things out first. And also know what she's wanting to use it for. Is she wanting to use it for concealed carry, or is she wanting to use it for home defense? Those are two totally different things.
Right.
And so, I think that's a big one. And I'm not ragging on men, because it is what you said. Like, I don't want them to think that I've met like, it's just a matter of like, there's a ton of areas that I'm failing at miserably that I'll go and ask, because occasionally I'll teach like I'll teach men like some knife stuff too. And I want to be better at that as well. I don't want to
talk a little bit about the knife training. Do you notice big differences between men and women? I mean, that's sort of a loaded question, because obviously yes, but
no, to be
interesting.
No, actually, once they've hit that point, I think like in the training aspect of it, no, I think that's what's interesting about that. When I've taught like a co-ed one, it's called offensive people opener. And it's another bridging the gap thing.
Gotcha.
Because it's like one of those people who's like, oh, I carry a knife. And I'm like, okay, great. Where is it? And they're like, oh, it's like at the bottom of my purse. Or, it's my pocket knife and it's a man and it's down here. And it's can you pull it?
Yeah.
And deploy it under pressure. And that's where, so that's where I like want to hit that part of it, because everybody will be like, is your stuff rooted in, FMA, or is your stuff rooted in Kali? And I'm like, no, because none of that is useful if you can't get the knife out.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So, but no,
That's
I think that once they get going, like there's very basic, Craig Douglas with his Edge Weapons Overview program, like that is one of the most phenomenal things. Like if you want to get into learning just right away and be improve inside of like 2 very long beat down 12-hour days, he's gonna get you in on that, you know, because at the end of the day, that's what I say, like men and women, they by the time you start watching them do like some of their, you know, evolutions and stuff like that, they look the same.
Yeah.
Like they're pretty, outside of like size disparity and getting chucked on the ground or something. But when it's a knife, knife is a really good equalizer on gender.
That's interesting. That's cool. I wouldn't have thought that. That's great. Well, so we're talking generalities, right? We're talking about you know, men and women, just, you know, average people that probably enjoy martial arts or whatever. What kind of experiences have you had working with women who have experienced some sort of trauma?
Ooh.
Like, I know you have, because I have, you know, and I don't even look for it.
So I am very big on crying. I have no problems telling people like it's okay to cry in here, because I cry all the time too. And a lot of times it just depends. Like stuff comes up, and in weird, it doesn't even have to be like, oh, I got hit really hard and I'm hurt. It could be, you know, I remember I tell this story of, I was at Fit to Fight. I was training with Ryan Hoover and Amber for a month. And we're in the middle of like, and it had been a long, like I was there probably 6 days a week. And then we were doing stuff on the weekends, like different programs and stuff. Cause I was trying to get they're under their training certification. She was having me do sprawls. And like I did 10 of them, and all of a sudden I just started like crying. And I was like, what is that? Like, and it's just like, so weird stuff comes out. With trauma, when you look at, like, I talk about this too, you know, 1 in 3 women have been sexually assaulted. So when I'm looking at a class of 15, that's 5 women in my class that have experienced some sort of sexual assault. So I pay attention to that. So I'm very big on the, you know, if you're going to cry, you need to cry. Just do it. Nobody's going to judge you here. And if they do, they can walk right on out. Like, I deal a lot with, you know, the intimidation factor. Women are scared to be in there, even in my class, you know. And that's the other part too, is like, I want to be an approachable person. I don't want to be somebody that like looks like they're just so big, bad, and tough, you know. First of all, I'm not going to look that way anyway. Like everybody's average soccer mom. But I have women that they'll come up and they're learning how to do like a power slap or something like this. And they'll be standing in line and they're like this, and their hands are just shaking. We do a debrief at the end. I think those are huge because that gives women an opportunity to talk about things that they liked, things they learned. And a lot of stuff usually comes out with that. I need to be better, and this is something I've noticed recently, of writing a more, I think probably a more heartfelt and encouraging pre-course letter, because I've noticed a lot of women say to me, like, I almost didn't come. So I've been thinking about that, about like more or less like if they're thinking and then they decide not to come because they are intimidated. So that's been on my mind a little bit lately about that.
That is fascinating. I've never thought of that. I do notice that there is a difference between the way men and women approach, you know, curriculum in my class, where the dudes are more into, they just want to show up and get sweaty. You know what I mean? Whereas the women seem to want to know the history or like the reasoning. They want to know why. And you know, as a guy, my initial reaction is to be like, shut up and let's train. You know what I mean?
Women don't want to look stupid. That's a huge one. I still don't want to look dumb. Like I've had to really talk myself into being like, well, this is it.
Well, I mean, and I think, you know, as the instructor or the school owner, it's sort of like paramount. It's your job to create that environment where you can have the differences, you know what I mean? Where it's okay. So, I mean, what are some of the things you look for? If you were, let's say you were shopping, you know, you've mentioned the school you train at a few times, but let's say you were shopping, you moved to a new city. What are some of the things you would look for
in a martial arts gym?
Sure. Or you know, you would interview.
Do they laugh?
Do they laugh?
That is the number one thing that I am looking for when I go. So I do reviews on gyms all over. So on my website, there is what I call they're safe places to train or safe courses that I've taken. If I've visited your gym and your name's not on there, that means I did not find your name.
Okay.
So laughter is a big one. If people can goof off, because you talk about, like, I have a lot of friends that are military, law enforcement. I have 3 veteran brothers. And when you discuss, like, and also in foster care, one of the things that I talk about too is, you have to be able to laugh because it's really, really freaking hard. And like one of my sons, he's 12 now, but when we detoxed him, he was a meth baby. And it was funny because, I mean, obviously detoxing infants is, but it's not fun. But one of the things that was interesting is, a side effect of it is that here's this, 2-week-old baby, and he smelled like feet. And like, it was like, that's just how his system was, and some people are like, oh my gosh, I love the way a newborn baby smells. And I'm like, not this one. And he's like, and now he still smells like feet because he's 12, and he's like, but it's very interesting because you have to laugh about that. Like, there has to be a joke thrown in there. And I was teasing, like, even, I don't even want to call it, like, maybe crude humor, but I'll occasionally, even in my class, throw out that's what she said. And just to see if anybody chuckles, and I'll get 1 or 2.
Right.
But yeah, that's the first one I look for. If I throw out a joke or if I make some comment, because I'm going to go in there and I usually try and, like, I try and go in there and I'm like, I don't know shit. Like, because I don't. Like, everybody has something to teach me, My grandfather, I don't think, passed the 8th grade. And I mean, geez, he was one of the smartest people I know. So it's like everybody has something to offer. Yeah. So do they joke? Do they have a good ratio of I'm learning? And an instructor too, also something else I'll look for is, do they have control over the class? That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do they pair people up? Especially if you're a new female. I really appreciate it when an instructor will be like, hey, so-and-so, go with her. Because then that alleviates the stress of me, like, because I don't know these people. I don't know who's safe to roll with. I don't know.
You don't want to be the last one picked either. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's fine. I'm used to kickball. So.
I was always the last one.
I look for that. And then, is their stuff really applicable? That's another one too. Like, what are you teaching and what's the goal? Is this going to be relevant to, like, what are you, and that's the other part too, I'll tell women, like, what are you going for? Are you going for self-defense, or are you just going for sport? Or are you going for fitness? None of those are bad.
Right.
But just pick which one you're going to go for. And that's going to be, you need to look for those things and tell that instructor too, this is what I'm looking for. And if they're a good instructor, they'll be like, Ryan Hoover, he'll be the first one to tell you. He's like, I'm not an MMA gym. Like, if you want to go learn to fight, he has recommendations down the road of, here, go do this. Yeah. So I really appreciate that about him.
I find that's a sign of a very mature gym owner or instructor is feeling comfortable. Like, we don't do that here, but my buddy so-and-so does that. So go talk to him. I'll set you up. Like, any of the gyms I've ever run into, they're like, we can do anything and everything. Just come on and sign up. It's
right.
Like, that's probably a flag.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big red flag. Exactly.
Yeah. I would think so. Like, you're like, really? Even in a non-martial arts gym, if I've walked into some and they're like, we do CrossFit, powerlifting, marathon running, and you're like, dude, there's no way we can do all this.
And the tactical games.
Yeah, dude. No, I'm not doing it. Yeah.
It's I like funny you said CrossFit. It's very interesting because so this was really cool. Are you part of the Combatives Association?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna have to send you an invite.
Cool.
It's really a neat thing. So there's a lot of people that are on there that are a lot of badasses in a lot of different fields, right? And they're getting ready to do this combative summit down in Florida with Redbeard Combatives who have trained under him, and he was amazing too, which I haven't listed his thing on there, so don't think that I thought he was unsafe, because he was amazing. I just haven't got that far yet. Anyway, they're getting ready to do this thing. Well, what was really cool is they had another guy named Nick, and I'm going to butcher his last name. It's like Degladio or something like that. I don't even know. But he is a strength coach. And here's these guys that are like badasses in their field from like all over the United States. And we're talking like MMA, like a guy that was in the UFC. We're talking like guns, knives, like all these people that are like, yeah, you want to go
Sure.
work with them. And every one of them unanimously agreed, like when Nick had talked about, at the very beginning, it's just like a foundational thing. And that's what I really like about it, was strength. And they were all like, yeah, you need to be strong. And that's one of the things like I love, like I'll tell women, I'm like, here's the deal. If you've got kids, like how I'm maneuvering in public
100%.
is very different when I'm alone versus when I'm with kids. And it's like, do you have the ability to pick up your toddler and run in the event of an active shooter and carry them for that amount? You're looking like, actually, it's funny. I was talking to my friend Kim the other night in class, and we were discussing kettlebells. And we were discussing weight size, and I was like, well, this is the size of my toddler. And like, that was like, she was like, it's funny that's how you equate all of your stuff to, is like, this is the one you can pick and like,
so more toddler sized kettlebells in the gym. I got
more toddler sized kettlebells in the gym. But
no,
yeah.
He's sort of old school, but I've trained with Tony Blauer a little bit back in the day. Which I don't know if you know who he is, but I
do.
I always found him interesting because he had that huge CrossFit self-defense program, where they were teaching self-defense inside CrossFit boxes. And he used to catch so much shit over that.
Well, and that's what's funny is like, I've talked with like, I've talked with like men, and it's just like, in terms of like, where do you start? And it was just like, I think there, like before you start like flipping around with knives and all this stuff, like, and for women too, like, are you fit to be able to do this? Like, start there. It doesn't mean you can't do the other things in the middle, but it's just kind of like, I thought that was really interesting because I'm not strong. Like, I have the body of a slight heroin addict. Like,
Jesus.
It's I'm not the one that's out there doing power cleans or something like that, but I do want to know, am I capable of grabbing my 5-year-old and hauling ass out of there? Do I have, and that's the other part too, is do I have it worked out with them in public? I have a lot of kids to herd,
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. Well, so 9 of them, they've got to protect you.
Yeah.
If you have 9 of them, they've got to protect you. I'm sorry.
Got an army.
You got to put them to work. Well,
so
that's interesting. That's one of the, I have quite a few people. I'm probably, because I'm in Columbia, South Carolina. There's a lot of gyms. I mean, there's 3 or 4 CrossFit boxes. There's, your standard gyms. There's 2 or 3 jiu-jitsu studios. There's maybe 2 or 3 karate studios. There's really no Muay Thai. There's 1 boxing gym. Anyway, I get quite a few people because I'm sort of known for like cross training, lots of different stuff, fitness and martial arts and self-defense. One of the first things I will tell them is, well, the best thing you can do for self-defense is be fit, which is what you just said. It's to be in some sort of shape. Like, this, hands down, none of the techniques are going to work unless you are, I mean, if you can't run 10 yards without, passing out, you have a problem.
Right.
I think we'd agreed on that because you said that. But what are some other things that you tell people? Men or women, or men and women, however you want to approach it. But
you're going to be more gassed under adrenaline. There's a very different feeling of like sparring and doing a roll in class than being under, like, you will lose your breath. So one of the things that I talk about is a lot of breath work, of how do you I talk a lot about how do you combat adrenal responses, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of them is like, you have to get your heart rate down when you are under stress, or in have an adrenaline rush going on. You're gonna gas out a lot faster.
Right.
And that could be anything from like over a long period of time. I talk about I was in a car accident about last January, and I rolled my car down the highway. And like, I will tell you 100%, I know for a fact that car and my training like saved my life, because I was in the car, and I remember like it was rolling, and I was thinking, as soon I'm in the middle of this highway, it's dark, it's rainy, as soon as that the car stops, you need to get out of the car. Like, and so it was like weird, you know, those things are flying. I'd hit the, you know, both
Damn.
of the, you know, airbags. And as soon as that car stopped, it was like undo. I had to find my phone. And then I was kicking, I couldn't get out this door. So I was kicking the side door. But being calm, like, or figuring out how to, like, okay, so breathing, like when you're dealing with this, you have to get your heart rate down because your heart rate's coming up. Okay. That may not have anything to do with you being, like in, you know, running or something like that.
Absolutely.
Like calisthenics. Okay.
Right.
It may not have anything to do with that. It has everything to do with like your, you know, and so you have to get yourself calm in order to get your heart rate down. And I actually just tested this out because I had to do an echocardiogram and cardiac stress test to get my fighter's license in the state of Arkansas. And your exhale has to be longer than your inhale. So, so it doesn't even matter if it's like, oh my gosh, you know, you have to be
okay.
Right. So that's a start of getting your breathing under control and being I'm very loud about it. Like I tell people even in the gym, I'm like, be loud about your breathing. Cause that's the first thing everybody does when they start is they don't breathe.
Right.
The second one is, compartmentalizing, taking things and pushing them off to the side.
Okay.
And that's something that it's like, okay, well, I am scared, but this has to visually, it's right here. And now I need to push it over here so that I can focus on the task at hand. And you may have to do that several times in, over a long period of time, because sometimes it's not just one small thing that's happened. Maybe, you know, for my instance, I have a son that's special needs. And when he was 16, he got lost on our property and was gone for 6 hours. And we had, you know, people out there. We had a search party out there of 50 people going through our woods and everything like this. And, you know, you'd be like, every, you know, so often I'd be like, oh my gosh, where do I gotta find my kid? And then I'd be like, I'm going to find my kid. But I had to do that several times, you know. And so those things are I don't actually know if that was even remotely related to your question. I think
it is. No. What I find interesting is that I asked you about self-defense skills, and we have yet to talk about actually putting hands on someone else.
I know.
I mean, I find it interesting. And how do you make that interesting for students that come to a martial arts school?
How do you make? I think you have to explain. I think stories. They need. I hear this a lot. Like you have to have relatable stories of why this is even applicable.
Yeah.
Goal setting is a big one. I talk about if you research waterboarding, okay, and how when they do training for waterboarding, it's about you know, small goals. Like sometimes you have to take all your goals and just really hunker them down to something what's achievable for that moment.
Yeah.
And so like that's a big one is when they talk about waterboarding, it's like the goal for that is not to survive to the next day, it's just survive to the next breath. So that's the goal. Okay, I'm going to survive to this next breath. You know, so that goes back into how do you eat an elephant? Everything builds on each other.
Right.
In terms of how do I keep it interesting in my classes, I don't know about, I think that there has to be a good balance between moving around and bloviating. So like if you're telling a story and you're talking and you're explaining it, then they have to be moving. So there's a sitting at the beginning and then there's sitting at the end in a debrief. But for the most part, when I'm talking, everybody's usually up and then we're going on to the next thing. That's something I learned from Craig and how he runs his classes. Because you're never bored. You want to die later, but
yeah, you shouldn't be. What are some things that some things that you prioritize with women over teaching, you know, mixed classes or whatever?
Boundary setting.
Okay. What does that look like?
It looks like how do we if we're just talking about in personal lives too, but so I deal with several women that are coming from domestic violence situations too.
Okay.
How do you get there in the first place? And a lot of people don't see that as like, they just like, oh, well, why doesn't she just leave? I hear this a lot and this one really irritates me. They're like, why doesn't she just leave? You know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, she can't. First of all, one, her, you know, self-conscious, like she's just been beat down slowly over time because how do you eat an elephant is this way, but also how are you torn down? It's circling the drain.
Same thing.
So they have to, get out of there first. But they also, like, I hear this too, like with women in domestic violence situations, like, why don't they leave their ex-husband? They can just leave. And I'm like, no, they can't, especially if they have children, because I know you asked that question. I'm going to get to it. I swear to you.
I like rabbit holes.
Okay. But it's a very big thing. I struggle with this because it's like, if they're a good mom and you go and you get a divorce, there's a chance that that person who has been abusing you or your kids could get custody at some point of some sort. Okay. Now you're not there.
Yeah.
Now you're not there protecting your kids.
Yeah. It's complicated.
Right. And so I hear this all the time. Well, why doesn't she just leave? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, she can't. And also imagine you making that decision as a confident adult. Now put that on the extra layer of you don't feel worthy enough because you've been in this situation. You feel guilty because you are in this situation. Well, I deserve it.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, we had a family member, and this was in Europe. So this isn't like a United States thing. I mean, she's Swedish, and her husband systematically, there's no other way to say it, over the course of 2 years, alienated her from her family.
Yeah.
Slowly made her feel like shit, took away any kind of, ability to pay for things or whatever without him, and then abused her, and it was like such a giant ordeal to just get her away for a short period of time. It's not that easy. No, it's really, so that's the first step. Like, what's the one thing? So boundary setting. How do they recognize that? That's another one too, that I'm finding like a lot of people don't realize how damn hard that is. Like, I teach this and I'm in the dating world and I still find this hard. Sure. So like even on dates or something like that, being able to like, oh, well, I don't want to come across as a bitch, or, oh, maybe that was a bit too aggressive. Yeah. And then you also see how these things lead down to other things later. And that's what I'm saying is like, so how do I teach this? Well, I need to teach boundaries. So that's the first start. How do we keep people from farther back? How do I get over the fact that I've been raised to be nice? Yeah. That's a big one, because you don't want to be rude to a stranger. Well, yeah. Yeah, you do. So getting them to understand priorities in life, like your priority is to get home. So like I talk about, one of my first drills is, sorry, I can't help you. And that's dealing with panhandling and stuff like this, of keeping distance if someone's approaching you. I talk about no man needs to be asking you for help. That's it. Okay. So just start there. So the sorry, I can't help you drill is a big one. And a lot of people in the martial arts world, I hear this too. It's just like, you punch somebody and you're like, oh, sorry. I'm always going to say I'm sorry. I know. Always. But they get all upset because they're like, well, no, you shouldn't be sorry. And it's like, no, I am sorry because I want to help. Right. But I can't help you because my goal and my priority is to get home to my children so that I can be their mom. Okay. Right. I've dealt with, I use this as an example of, there was an old woman that was a panhandler that was tapping on the passenger side door of my car, and my 11-year-old son is sitting right there. I am sorry, I can't help her. I'm not rolling down that window, Right. So boundaries is a big one, of setting those up, giving them real life examples, and then letting them know they're not crazy. That's been a huge one. Like, because the first thing that will happen I'm going to relate back to the dating world, but the first thing that will happen if a man is rejected is that their ego gets hurt, right? And they automatically revert back to like, oh, and I use this a lot because if you ask this to any female, if you say this, oh, you're one of those girls, they all know that. They've all heard that. They've all heard that, like I call it heavy hand Jack, where he's always, doing this. And it's like, wow. So that boundary setting of realizing that you're not crazy because you don't want somebody to touch you. Yeah. Didn't ask, or that you're not, feeling with. Now, to be fair, in the dating world too, I want to make this clear. I feel for men too in figuring out how to navigate that. So, right. Because it's like, oh, So, but yeah, boundary setting in that aspect of it, especially with teen girls, grooming is a huge situation that we're dealing with. I get asked a lot by, it's usually dads, and they want to make their daughter safer. But I think this applies to both boys and girls in terms of
what can I do to make my kids safer? And I did a video on it, and it was kind of interesting because it went viral on TikTok. And I was like, man, if anything could, this was the one I would want. Because it was talking about like, what do you do to make your kids safer? And I was like, most people would assume that it's like get them into martial arts. And I'm like, no, the first thing that you need to do is that they need to learn the phrase, stop, you're making me uncomfortable. And they need to be able to say it loud. So drill that with your kid. And then the second one is understanding to always leave doors open. And, you know, I'm not talking about like home and stuff like this, but like,
what does that mean?
with teachers, with coaches, like when you're coming in to have a meeting or something like this, the door's open.
Okay.
So because that's one of the things that I've noticed, you know, like I hate to rag on this, but at the end of the day, like you start looking at grooming situations that you don't have to look far in the news to find a teacher or a coach or a principal that has done, you know, there's a grooming situation going on. I mean, Larry Nassar, let's start there.
Yeah, that's a whole that's a whole documentary. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. That's a whole documentary. Yeah. So that's been so boundary setting is a huge one with you're not crazy for not wanting someone to touch you if you don't want that. And then yeah. I hope that
I like that stuff. You know, because one of the I guess low-hanging fruit things that you always want to teach whenever you're doing a class or seminars, you're like, pay attention to your surroundings. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, yeah, no shit, but like, what does that look like? And
yes,
I like that because
like? Examples.
Yeah, you really broke it down. And you know, I mean, I'm not going to be that guy that says those things don't apply to men, but like for the most part, those aren't things that men worry about.
Right.
You know, like when I walk down the street,
though. That's what the grooming part does. Like
it's not top of mind though.
Right. And that's what's funny. I was just recently talking about like the differences in like women have grown up knowing that when they walk to the car, they've always grown up with the assumption of what can I do in order to keep myself from being raped.
Yeah.
Right. Men don't have that. They haven't had that thought process. And that's not a so that's a difference right there. But like, I mean, there was a story of a kid that was 13 that was groomed by his coach in Joplin, which is like 30 minutes north of me. And so the grooming thing, that one's, you know, all across the board. So definitely like with my, you know, even with my sons, like all the stuff I teach my daughters, that's still applicable. And I still teach my sons that, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's why I was like, I don't want to say like, not applicable. I mean, it is, but like we just don't think about it, you know.
Right.
And I definitely, you know, in my experience, I have been able to pay attention enough to know that, you know, it is top of mind for women, you know. And I think, I mean, I've seen videos on YouTube and stuff where, I mean, women catch flack for it, you know, where it's like, why are you always worried about it? You know, the women, why are you always worried about it?
Why?
It's like, well, no shit. Like, I mean, if she was on the other foot, I mean, it'd be a lot different world, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Empowerment and feeling safe. I mean, is that one of your goals? I mean, it sounds kind of cheesy, but
I hate the term empowerment.
Good.
So you know how you said you did like, what did you say earlier? You did like
reality-based martial arts.
Empowerment bothers me because I do not, and I tell this very much at the beginning of my class. I'm like, I am not training you to kick a man's ass because I don't think, my nose is running, sorry. There's no way that I can teach 15 women to kick a man's ass when I'm
in an hour? Come on.
Yeah.
I thought you were
like, it's fine. I got this. So I tell them like I'm not teaching you that. I'm teaching you to get away or survive long enough for help to come. Those are that's what those are feasible goals for the class. Like, I love Ryan Hoover said one of the things that he talked about was like, if every person walks away with something that makes them safer, then winner chicken dinner.
Yeah.
So I don't remember what the question was. Sorry.
I don't either. It's cool. You said Ryan Hoover, and it made me think about his program and the way he starts off with, like, let's say his sparring class. What do they call it? It's got a name, but his whole sparring approach, whatever. But he starts off with like, yeah, you go. He starts off with like grappling, you know, little pommeling or whatever, before you even like, you know, throw gloves at each other. And that opened my mind a lot about thinking about making people comfortable first,
Yep.
you know?
Pummeling is a really neat. I love, that's one of the things I teach is that is a very eye-opening, because it goes back down to foundations.
Mm.
So if you're moving this way, right,
Mhm.
then that's going to be applicable. Like, and when you, that's something that's very simple that you can get reps in really quick in a class, right? So when
Right.
you do that, that was one at ECQC that I had never done it before. And Craig had us do that. And I was like, okay. And you feel like an idiot when you're first learning it because it's a weird motion. Once you get it, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But once you get it, right. So after that drill was when I had to do my, my first evolution, and I was on the ground, and I
Mm.
didn't have any jujitsu experience at all. And here's this guy trying to get a hold of me because I had a sim gun, right? And it was weird because like I was doing this movement and I
Right.
had no idea, but it was because I'd done the reps. And I was like, that was so eye-opening for me. So those are the things like I try and like in my class is like, what are we supposed to do? Are there a million different things that you can do? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm trying to teach the bare minimum that I can that you're going to get that's going to have, reduce variables for failure. Right. And so pummeling is a big one because it's like, oh, okay, the more you can do this, the harder at least you're moving. Because
Yeah.
with women, we have a 72% chance, that's via that one study in Stockholm, Sweden, that they're going to experience what's called tonic immobility and they're not going to move at all.
Mm.
And so when you start looking at that, that's a really high statistic.
What was the percentage?
Do what? 72%.
72%.
So they did a study at a hospital in Stockholm, Sweden, on 298 women rape victims.
Right.
And 72%, and keep this in mind, this is only what was reported. Okay.
Right.
Experience what's called tonic immobility. They just
Mm.
froze during their rape and they did nothing because their body wouldn't allow them to. And so when you look at that, it's like, oh, okay, well, we're looking at a much bigger issue if we're looking
Yeah.
at that
Right.
statistic right there. You need to be able to move in the first place, right? And then also like, so combine that with what I was saying about like combating adrenal responses. Another one is basically, I can't do this. I can't keep going. I can't keep going. Thought rejection of I can.
Yeah.
So that's another one too of, with pummeling. Okay, great. This at least gives them movement that they can do, that they've repped. They can do this at home. Like that's another one. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of just starting that off. Like I had never even thought about it from like you saying like, oh, we're easing them on into the closeness. But yeah, I mean,
Right.
I usually say that right off the bat. I'm like, hey, we're going to get really uncomfortable and boob to boob in here. So
Well, I can't say that.
yeah, you probably shouldn't.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. I always thought that was interesting. The way he did that. And I've modeled some of my stuff, like how to get noobs off the street in here and, punching faces, like whatever. But I mean, that's the ultimate goal for most people, I guess. But what's interesting. I mean, you seem like a pretty mentally strong person. I mean, you got 9 kids. I mean, you made it here. You know what I mean? So what are some of the things you talk about to your, I'm going to call them students, to your students about mental toughness? I mean, do you ever even say the words?
Do what?
Do you ever say the words mental toughness to people?
No, I don't think it ever comes across. I talk a lot about what I fail, because that's where you're going to learn. Like, I love it when you go and you do some of these courses and, you have this expectation and you're really hard on yourself that you screwed up. Well, yeah, you're going to screw up, especially like scenario work. Like you're not ever going to get it right. And if you do, why are you taking this class?
Right.
So I talk a lot about what I've failed at and what I learned so that's mental toughness of like, because the bigger ones are the ones that stick with you that you'll never do again. There's a story that I talk about this guy that followed me up an elevator, but I didn't know this. He followed me up a flight of stairs and he had I was at a wedding and I didn't know that there was the flight of the stairs, and this whole thing was in a big square atrium with the elevator in the middle. So I was not, aware of my surroundings. So I'm on the 7th floor and he had gone up the stairwell. I had no clue where the stairwell was. And so I get it's like 3 a.m. I'm like locked out of, at the time my husband and my kids were in the room, and my key card wouldn't work. And so I had this bag, and I joke because I wrote a blog about it. It's called, Never Mess with Skinny Pop or something like that. I had this huge Costco bag of Skinny Pop, and it had survived the whole wedding. Like, I had done the whole bridal party's hair, and then we had just carried it around because we were like, this is a huge bag of Skinny Pop, right? So I still had it with me. It's 3 a.m., right? And so I'm leaning down by the door. My back is to the whole atrium. And I'm like, well, I can't get in. I got to go change my key card. And so I go to take a selfie with my Skinny Pop. And I go like this, and I stand up and I turn around, and that guy is standing 5 feet behind me.
Oh, shit.
And what ensued later was like, he kept trying to get on the elevator with me when I was going down. I was like, I'm not getting on the elevator with this guy.
Yeah,
but
sorry,
I mean,
bro.
the second I turned around, I knew I had screwed up. Like, it was a huge eye-opening, like, holy cow, Christun, what were you thinking? Like, he could have done anything.
Yeah.
And so I tell that story a lot about, like, because people, you always talk about situational awareness. And it was like, oh, okay, great. Like what you said, well, what does that even look like? Yeah. Well, maybe not taking a selfie with a bag of Skinny Pop.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, you can't be on level red 100% of the time.
We could talk about these levels.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
where I'm going with that, but like, your OODA loop can't always be prepped. I mean, it's called a surprise attack for a reason.
Right. And
people ask me, I've had people like, how do I survive somebody like, surprise attacking me from behind? I'm like, you don't. Like, you just got murked. Like, yes. That's what that's called.
You don't. So it's funny that people always talk about, was it Jeff Cooper, where all those levels of like red and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I teach, like, this is what's funny. I don't agree. This is gonna sound bad. I don't like multifaceted moves. Like, I just think that's not going to work in self-defense.
What do you mean by multifaceted? Like,
so like the first thing, you go into karate and they're like, here's a 4-point move to get out of a hair grab.
Oh shit. Yeah. Okay.
Or stuff like this, because you're not going to remember that shit under stress. It's not technical. Like, I joke because I tell this story all the time. Like, at ECQC, there was like this one dude that was like, he's an Army Ranger, and the guy was like the embodiment of live action G.I. Joe doll, just a very beautiful man. And he was like 6'4", he did pro MMA, and he was an Army Ranger, and he was taking stuff back, I think, to Fort Benning or wherever. And then the other guy that he was up against was Law Enforcement Officer of the Year in St. Louis, and he was like a brown belt in BJJ and done some MMA as well. And he was very pretty too, like looked like Captain America. And these two, when they went together, I videoed this. When they went together and were like doing all of their scenario work with, like, at this time it was like drawing a pistol under pressure, timing, and things like this, their shit looked ugly. I mean, it was a little bit technical, but it still was an ugly mess. They weren't getting all these 4.0, like, let me disarm your gun, stuff like that. That wasn't going to happen. Right. And so I always teach, like, one of the things I love about Aaron Giannetti with knife control concepts is he talks about it's movement. It's not moves. And you're going with, like, in knife defense with him, you're going with the flow of the bad guy and their movement. Like, so everything is, it's not like, oh, there's all of this. You should know all of that other stuff. This is the in-fight part. And so, like, I joke because it's like with the I'm going back, I swear to God, I have a point here. With the colors system, right? Where you have being red, being, all this. Well, to me, that's just one more thing you've got to remember. Oh shit. I'm walking across the parking lot and there's 2 thugs over here. I've got to be in red now. And it's
turn to yellow.
Turn to yellow, switch it back. The best example, and that's the other part too, I don't want women paranoid. Okay. That's no way to live your life.
Right. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. So the best example I've ever heard was Craig said, it's like driving in the rain. And he said, you're just a little bit more cautious. Maybe your hands are actually on there. You're not putting on, your mascara. Yeah. You're not like fiddling with the radio. You're actually just paying attention. You're looking at other drivers. Maybe you're keeping a little bit more distance between you and other cars. And that's the best way I've ever heard that described, because that's easily to remember. That's how I maneuver in public and things like that. So, yeah.
I'm stealing it. It's mine. Well, one last thing I want to get into. I do want to get into your I've heard you say it, and you said it when we first started, and I introduced you as a second degree black belt. So tell me a little bit about that experience. Training, it's karate is what you trained?
Yes.
And then where you are now and what you're doing. What got you in the karate in the first place?
We had a friend that owned a studio.
Okay.
And so we just started in there. And then we just it grew from there. I taught for a couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
And then it didn't end. It was a very cultish situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very, this is going to sound really, I'm sure that, with everything, you tend to pendulum swing the other way, right? I'm sure I'll come back to the middle eventually. I'm pretty against traditional martial arts.
Okay.
I'm not going to, I think for self-defense, let me start there.
Okay.
Maybe not for discipline or something like that. If you're going into a place where you're going to learn a bunch of katas and just moves, that's not going to get you there as fast.
Sure.
Did it help with being able to ease into other things? Yes, absolutely, astronomically. So maybe it was a good beginning. I don't know. I know that I will say, and I hate saying this too, because you were talking about empowerment. I will say that it maybe gave me a little bit more of what I thought was an arrogance, which in turn for some women, that is helpful in maneuvering the world, because if you can carry yourself confidently, right, then, Christopher Barry D, he did a serial killer. He was a criminologist, and he interviewed all these serial killers and serial rapists. And he talked about 82% of them said if a woman had rough speech, that they would deselect them.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about deselection. So do I think that helped in terms of confidence level of how I looked when I carried myself? Maybe I looked a little bit more. So now we're in deselection. Mental toughness, probably, I think in that one, that was hard for me.
Yeah.
Because I was it was the first thing I'd ever done that was for me.
Yeah. Okay.
When I had all the kids. So that was interesting. But yeah, it was, but then, I think with everything, and perhaps this is just what everybody goes through, is if you're continuing to learn, then you go and you want to test out what you know. And so when I went to that ECQC, there was a lot of things that I was starting to realize. I was with karate, they want this, it seems like a one size fits all thing. And that's not true.
Right.
What's going to work for me and my size is not it doesn't take anything. I can do, this a knife, and a guy could just bicep curl me, and then so I remember doing a couple moves, and I was nobody had a good answer I'm this isn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
And so when I went to ECQC, I think that was the eye opener. There was also a lot of stuff too that I wanted to get more into the psychology part. I was we're teaching all of this, but we're not getting into, I was also told you're never going to go to the ground, so don't worry about that. We all know that's a lie.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
So there was that. And then the psychology behind it, I wanted to gear it more towards what I saw with women and bridging a gap. And it was, again, a one size fits all. You weren't allowed to go cross train. That's a big number one. That's one you asked about, red flags to look for in a gym. If they say you can't go and train elsewhere, run.
That is kind of horseshit.
They should be confident enough in what they're teaching that you should be able to go elsewhere. So there's that.
I find that's more of it stems from a business aspect more than a, safety for you aspect or training or whatever.
The other one is, I'll tell you this, another red flag I look for is I'm worried that they're going to steal my material. No. You can find any of this shit online. So
yeah.
If they're saying, if they're worried about I don't want you to take this and it's secret society bullshit, no.
Yeah.
There's nothing on there that there's nothing new. Okay. It's not.
Yeah.
It's just been reworked. And you know what happens? Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the simple shit that ends up working. So
yeah, that's right. That's right. In my karate training, there's I don't know, we did 10 or 12 sets of self-defense moves or whatever. And it's the very first 4 are the
Right.
ones that, like, we should probably just stop here because this is
Well,
what's
it's like
going to wind up
with
happening.
like Kali and like FMA
Yeah.
and stuff like this, and it's like, is it rooted? Well, yeah, if we're talking about this motion,
Yeah, but all the other fancy stuff, yeah, come on.
the end, and
Yeah.
so I'm not against it. Like I'm not against it. I'm just, it's a struggle. I'm sure I'll come back to it in
Yeah.
ways of, but yeah, I had
Sure.
a bad burnout with it. So
Yeah, that tends to happen, especially if you're kind of in a culty situation. Why does it always seem like it's karate and taekwondo schools that are like that? I mean, what the, but I'm saying that, but I trained at a jiu-jitsu
oh, they get culty too.
building that was very similar.
Yeah.
And it was like, what are we like? What the hell?
By far, when I go and I travel to, if they say on there, this is where I'm saying where I'm like a little bit on the rebellious side of that aspect of it, which these are petty shit. So it's like, oh, well, but if they purposefully say on their website of, we train in a white gi, so bring a white gi, I purposefully bring my purple one. So yeah, I'm like,
That's
oh,
funny.
I didn't know. What are they gonna do?
Yeah. We'll see how they respond. Yeah,
Sorry, you can't come here. Just knew I'm here for one day.
that's funny. That's really
So,
funny.
yeah, so there is that bulk of at that sort of tradition, and it sucks because it's like I even raise my kids like so at TCB, they do have taekwondo and stuff like that. I don't think that's actually terrible because recently I've taken a couple of those classes just for like kicks and stuff like that, just to improve. Right. So, I mean, I think, again, it goes back down to foundations. But, and I mean, they're going to be the first ones to be able to get you to stretch, to be able to actually do that right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me. I talk to a lot of people that, they say similar things to what we're saying, but they all have that basic first experience to whatever level they went to in something like karate. And I always find it funny that, it's not the art itself, it's the people that we're always sort of talking about.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you, one of the things that I will notice, and this, I guess, another red flag, is your instructor consistently placing themselves under other people to learn. That is a huge one, because if you're an instructor that has decided, you're the grand master or whatever the heck you are, and you're not learning under other, like the head person is not, because you're never that badass. Like, that's just a fact. You're never going to be there. I have met guys that I sat in a class, and this was amazing. I was in a knife control concepts course, and it was held at Virginia Beach Jiu-Jitsu. My friend Scotty owns it. And he's a like 3rd degree black belt. His friend was there. His name's Ben's something in there. He's like a 3rd degree black belt. I think they were. Craig was there as a student. Okay. Aaron, who was teaching it at the time, was a brown belt, and he's the one that runs it. Right. And then everybody there was like brown belt and above in jiu-jitsu, like all, and they were also like badasses and pistols and knives and all this stuff. They were all there to learn under this one person for what he specified in. And also and that was the part where I'm just like, there was not one ego in that room. Like, these guys could use me as the embodiment of a dry mop. And there was nobody there that was too good for what they were like. They weren't even like, if they thought that, hey, this might work better, they would show it. But they all paid attention. They all did the drill. They didn't try to do their own stuff. Their ego was completely left at the door. And I'm like, if these guys, this conglomerate of badassery, can come together and place themselves under another person that was of lower rank because of what they want to learn, like, that's a mark of those are good trainers. And I'd learned under like 3 of those people in that room. So
that's excellent. Yeah, I don't know how many seminars I've been to that, like, the person's showing you techniques, and then we do some stuff, and then we break away to spar, and then no one does the techniques the guy just taught. Right. It's like, well, what the hell? Did we just come to spar each other? I mean, we
Yeah,
could have
what's
done
the
that without
point? Why
paying
are
for the
we here?
fee.
Like, why aren't you working what you've learned? Like, there's
Yeah.
been times where I've like worked out kinks and I'm like, okay, this one's not going to work, so I'll tweak it because of size or whatever.
Right. But that's why you're there.
Well, right. But that's why you're there, is to work
Yeah.
that shit out. You're there to work that drill. Yeah, no, that one's a big one. Yeah. So I loved it. Like, that's how I think that's a mark of a good instructor, is that you're constantly placing yourself under other people, because you're never that badass. There's always someone you can learn from.
Yeah,
So
it's always a bigger fish for sure.
yeah.
Well, Christun, that's a great conversation. I feel like there's probably another hour in here somewhere of just random stuff, but I dig it. Where can people find you? What do you want to sell?
What do I want to sell? Just on Instagram, or I'm on Instagram as healthy.buffalo. I'm on Facebook, and then TikTok's a weird one. But yeah, we're getting ready to do more things that are going to be more geared towards an online course.
Awesome.
Kind of get me out of traveling a little bit more.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's
great.
Find me all there, and
Buffalo,
I think there's a link in there somewhere.
Yep, we'll put all the links up. Thank you. Yeah, and let us know whenever you launch your stuff. I'm sure I'll see it, but let me know otherwise. We'll definitely tell the world as much as we can. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast. It was
Absolutely.
very nice to meet
I
you.
hope so.